Hey guys, welcome to my channel. So Ashley, I've been waiting to do this video for forever now. I took this screenshot back in February, so that's like 7 or 8 months that I've been waiting to do this project. So that was my inspiration, and this is how the sewing went. Alright, so day one I worked on the pattern. I used this old bustier pattern that I used to make this, and it's already fit to me, so I just have to change the shape of it a little bit. So I did a little flat sketch of the corset to try and figure out what kind of pattern pieces I needed. So the original pattern had cups. So instead of the cups, I'm just adding length to the top of the front pieces and also trying to figure out the curve of the neckline. And this is the center front piece that I'm working on. The original pattern had kind of an extreme point, so I just had to make that more curved, but I still want it to come down a little bit in the front. And then from the center front, I just moved on to the piece next to it and made sure they were matching up at the neckline. And then I just kept doing that, going around until I finally got to the center back piece. And then I went back and traced the center front piece so that I could draw in the heart cutout, which is so important to the look. It's like the literal centerpiece. So I kind of had to guess the measurements by eye from the picture. So I just measured where I wanted the center point of the heart to be, and then I measured my 1-inch seam allowance from there, and I made a point where the widest part of the heart should be, and then I just drew half of a heart. And I added 1/4 inch seam allowance to that. And yes, I was listening to the entire Short and Sweet album while making the pattern. I decided to make some bloomers to go with the corset instead of making it into a dress, but I can rewear the corset and it wouldn't feel too much like a costume. So here's all the pattern pieces cut out, and that took me all of day one. Okay, so day 2 I started cutting out the fabric, starting with the lining fabric, which was just this thick striped polyester blend that I got for free. And to cut out the heart, I went in with my scissors. Then I just marked all of the notches on each piece that tell me where they need to be lined up. And I also went in with my erasable pen and numbered them in case they get out of order, because that happened to me before when I was sewing this pattern. After that, I cut out all of the outer fabric. I had barely just enough of this sparkly pink fabric, and I've been waiting to use it for something, so why not this? And then I did the same thing, cutting all the notches, only I didn't number each piece because I didn't want to ruin the outer fabric on accident somehow. So then it was finally time to sew, and I started with the lining, pinning it together down the center front and then sewing 1 inch from the edge. And here's how the little cutout looked. And then I just worked my way out, sewing a piece to each side until I made my way all the way to the center back, sewing all of them at 1 inch seam allowance. Moving on to the outer fabric, I did the same exact thing, starting with the center front, pinning them right sides together and sewing at 1 inch. And you want to sew at 1 inch for anything with boning because you're going to use that seam allowance later to make the boning channels, and it'll just add an extra layer to your channel so that your boning isn't like sticking out everywhere. So then with both the lining and the outer fabric sewn together, it was time to press all the seams open. And before going any further, I tried it on to make sure everything was fitting right. And I ended up taking in a couple of the seams at the very top so that it wouldn't be gaping when I bend over or anything. Although you can't really bend over in a corset like that. So this is me taking in the outer fabric to match the lining. And then I went back and seam ripped open that original seam line. On day 3, I cut out a couple of basting pieces to finish the heart cutout, and I just took the pattern piece and laid it on top to make sure the heart shape was the same. And then I pinned it on the front of the fabric using many pins. And then I sewed around the heart carefully at 1/4 inch. Then I went in and trimmed back the seam allowance pieces that got kind of stuck in there. And then in order to turn the facing around, I had to go in and flip the corners and all the curves. And here's how it looked after pressing. And same thing for the outer piece. Alright, so day 4 already. It was time to sew the pieces together, lining to outer fabric. So I decided to trim them to make sure that there was a clean line to follow and that they matched up at the neckline. And then I took my lace and measured out how much I needed. And I didn't need it to be that thick, so I just sliced it down the center, and because it was stretch lace, it didn't fray or anything. And then I took that piece of lace and sandwiched it between the lining and outer fabric, and I sewed along that top edge at 1/2 inch, and I made it all the way to the end until I realized that I pinned it together wrong. So, without even taking a break, I seam ripped that and started over, repinning right sides together this time and resewing. Then I trimmed that seam allowance and flipped it right sides out. Then I decided to add some lace to the heart cutout, so I just sandwiched it in and sewed really close to the edge, and this also covered if the hearts didn't meet up perfectly. The next step is to sew the channels, so I just went in and made sure all the seams were matching up, pinning them together, and then sewing down the center of each seam, starting from the center seam and working my way to the center back piece. And then I went back and sewed 1/4 inch from each seam on either side. The only seam that I didn't sew on was the one above the heart because there won't be any boning there. Then I went through and trimmed all of my threads, and there was a lot after that. Then I decided to add my zipper, so I folded one side in about 3/4 inch and then marked where I wanted to pin my zipper on the other side. So it ended up being kind of like a lap zipper where there's like a flap covering the zipper so you don't see it. So I pinned it to the other side, making sure the top matched up nicely. And then this is where I realized that it's not an open-ended zipper, and instead of just ripping it out immediately, because I didn't want to spend any more money, I just tried it on to see if I could get it over my head, and I could, so I just sewed it in like that. I added thread stops at the top to keep the zipper from flying off, and then I just trimmed it to the right length, and I went in with a lighter and melted all the edges so they wouldn't fray. And, you know, still wanting to save money, I used weed whacker cord instead of traditional boning, and I just cut them all to the right length and then melted the ends so they wouldn't cut through the fabric. And the last thing to do for the day was to glue on a crap ton of rhinestones. So I just did that while I was watching Beetlejuice. Okay, day 5, finishing the corset. I measured around the bottom edge to add a binding, and then I just cut a bunch of 2-inch strips out of this lacy white fabric, and then sewed them together, and then pressed them into bias tape. And then I just pinned it all the way around and sewed it on to finish the bottom edge, make it look nice, and to keep the boning in. Moving on to the bloomers, these really went through an interesting transformation. So I started out with cutting out the shorts pattern from this stretchy white fabric that's almost like swimsuit material. And I sewed it together with a zigzag stitch so it would stay stretchy. And then I sewed together the front and back pieces, and boom, it's shorts. And I sewed together all of these ruffles with elastic, and I lost all the footage for it, so that's fun. I ended up adding 3 more pattern pieces to the shorts to make them look a little bit more like bloomers because I don't have enough ruffles to cover the entire thing. So these 2 pieces are going to be a waistband, and it's going to be kind of a gathered situation. I just have to add elastic to get it to fit my waist, and it'll end up being gathered and bubbled like bloomers are. So I just sewed a thin piece of elastic on with a zigzag stitch. Then I added elastic to the bottom of that piece. And then these 2 pieces will be added to the legs of the shorts. Do you see the vision now? Here's how the bloomers turned out. I'm honestly conflicted about them. They're like the ugliest thing I've ever made, but they're also cute. Let's see if the corset pulls it together. That's all I have for you guys. I hope you liked how it turned out. Leave a comment down below to tell me what you think. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to see more videos like this. And if you feel like it, you can follow me on Instagram and TikTok. Thanks for watching.